Hello, hello. Welcome to episode 95 of the Titanforge podcast.
Yeah,
Yes. That wasn't a
that
question
is
mark, that was a statement.
that was
Uh,
definitely a question mark. But
my name is Rados, joined by my friend Tettles.
yo, what's
Yeah.
up? We're back.
Yo. And Trell, both Tettles and Trell in new locations as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. I just moved in this last week, like 3 days ago. I'm still getting set, so there's a bunch of random crap behind me.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. I love the Amazon box there as well, that just in frame. Um, this week we have a lot of dungeon related changes coming in 9.1. And the big news as well being that we know when 9.1 is going to come out now. So the patch date is the 29th or 30th of this month. So
Yeah,
in 1.5 weeks from the time we're recording this. And here is a look at the raid unlock schedule. Notably, it's about a week faster than the kind of default for patches, where normal and heroic week will be 1 week after the patch, and mythic week will be 2 weeks after the patch. And then, of course, Raid Finder slowly opens up after that. But that's not too relevant for me and Trell, of course.
I gotta get my content in somehow, dude. I gotta see the bosses. It's like it's just one of those things that it's really great that they make the content as accessible for everybody.
Agreed. So this announcement was met with, I would say, a surprising amount. At least I saw a surprising amount of wait, this is too soon, which I don't think is reasonable. I think it's obviously been long
I
enough.
know, right?
But I do think there was the reasonable strain of criticism here was like, hey, we would love to have a little bit more notice about this, particularly people in those guilds that are like World 3 through 10 that are trying to compete for World First, but have a lot of people that work full time. I think it would be nice if if a little bit more notice could be given for those people to be able to schedule some vacation time and try and compete.
I mean, I think that they should give more notice anyways, but I don't think that that's the reason that they should give more notice for patch date specifically.
Yeah, well, I think for anybody that like wants to play the new patch a lot, it's nice to maybe be able to take a couple days off to go hard and do all the new content and stuff. I think that's something that people have a lot of fun doing.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I think that this I'm pretty sure that the patch was gonna get delayed, but they decided that like at the last they announced this patch date at the absolute last minute. Like they could not have announced the 29th basically any later, to the point where I thought it was going to get pushed to a different date than the ones that were previously speculated on, because it had been so long.
Yeah, there've
Yeah.
been speculation from like pretty solid sources floating around for the past month that patch date was 29th, right? And that it's one of those things where you've heard those sorts of things floating around at different times, and sometimes they end up being wrong because stuff does get pushed back. And I thought we were in that world as well. I thought there was going to be like, oh, we actually aren't quite ready yet, but there it was. What do you think about
It
the short time until the raid opening up as well? The shorter, we don't have like 2 weeks of no raid.
I mean, well, for one, I was gonna say before we go on to that. Sorry.
Okay.
What do you think is the reason that they announced it like 10, 12 days before the patch? Like, do you think they have some critical system to fix and they finally have it worked out to like, okay, we can actually launch on the date we're planning on, or do you think it's another reason?
I suspect that they were just like making classic BC. Like I
I
bet
don't think that's it.
no no
I
no
think
no
those
no
are
no
completely different
no.
teams.
Well, not all. No, not always. Because, well, I guess the inner workings of WoW are a little bit different. Yeah, okay, so they'll take people from like the Overwatch and like the Classic and the Heroes of the Storm team to make a new WoW expansion. I bet that it kind of worked in reverse with the BC. I bet that some of the developers had to go work on BC at some points, or maybe they were just like understaffed in that department. It's really hard to say exactly what the reason was.
I think it's
So
just much simpler than that, which is like they would like to announce it as late as possible because they would like as much flexibility. Like once they've announced something,
well,
now it hurts them if they change it, right? But if they don't
well, they're
announce
le
something, they can just change it whenever they want.
Yeah, exactly. I
Sure.
mean, they don't want to announce it late because that they can't change it at that point. But more of the reason is like, why is it coming out so late relative to like
Yeah, I mean the obvious thing is that the
COVID? But
process is completely
is
different because of doing everything
yeah,
remotely.
yeah. But it is. Whew, Damn, it's been a hot minute since we got a new patch.
Yeah, it's certainly been a
Yeah.
long content drought. I don't think anybody would dispute that. I mean, I know Blizzard doesn't dispute that right there. They're like, yeah, this has been a long time. Um, but yeah, anyways, that's the news. We've got the patch date, and we've got the Mythic and Heroic Raid dates as well. So time is running out to make any final decisions about what specs or whatever you're gonna play next tier.
Is
There,
it? I don't know if it's always running out. Like, you can always reroll to some other shit.
yeah, but now if you want to be hitting the ground running, now's the time to make sure you got all your eggs in the right basket. Make sure you got your right covenant. Make sure you got your renown all set up. You know,
Correct legendary craft in the right slot, normal stuff.
well, we'll talk about that. I think later, but actually, we don't have that anywhere on the show today. So let's talk about that now, which is the domination sockets and legendary crafting impact. Oh wait, hang on. We do have this coming up later. Yeah, we do. Okay. We'll talk about this
Do
in a
we?
bit. Yeah, a little bit. Okay.
Oh.
Another little piece of news is there's some conduits that'll be coming out in the raid that I think are kind of interesting to talk about. There's a potency and endurance conduit, which I don't know if you guys remember in BFA we had the like Bwansamdi's bargain or whatever, treacherous covenant, loyal to the end, those like Azurite traits that everybody got. These are basically coming in now as conduits that every class gets. There's a potency conduit that says when you're healed by another player, give you some primary stat for 15 seconds. This can occur once every 30 seconds. And there's an endurance conduit that says when you take any damage, heal for a percentage of your max health. This can only occur once every 10 seconds. I'm not sure these conduits are going to be good for anybody, but they have the delightful effect of increasing the pool so that it's going to take you more of those upgrades to upgrade the conduits you want to upgrade with the conduit upgrader system. So that's fun. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, dude, the system is like, I think it's a fine system. It's just like, it's also very clear that they've taken some inspiration from tier sets in the past where they're just like, oh, players are able to get this from raid. This is like a tangible source of power that only exists in raid, and at least in its current state, and it's locked to specific item slots, right? And
Are you
it's
talking
supposed to
about
be like,
Shards of Domination now?
yeah, shards of domination, but I mean, it's all the similar
Okay.
thing, right? You're talking about the conduits, right?
Yeah, the new conduits, the
Yeah, I
armor,
mean,
the animospheres things. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's all. Do you like the new conduits? I don't think the new conduits like really matter that much, though.
Yeah, I mean the main thing they're going to do is it's going to take you more conduit upgrades to upgrade your actual conduits to the full item level because these are in the pool now. That's
Yeah,
all they do.
is it really gonna feel like the laser matrix slash other stuff, or do you think it's just gonna be?
I think they're worse than those because those were like pretty good for like remember Archive of the Titans and Treacherous Covenant.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Archive
yeah,
is
People
yeah.
wore those. Most specs wore those. Like if you didn't wear those, it was because you had some banging Azurite powers of your own. These I think are more going to be the exception where like I don't think you'll see these played very often, right? If you look at the endurance one here, it's when you take damage heal for 2% of your max health once every 10 seconds. So this is HPS equal to 0.2% of your max health at
Yeah.
this value. And even if you get it up to the 4.5% value, that's, yeah, 0.5% of your health is HPS. I mean, maybe it's decent for tank specs that have a really bad endurance conduit slot. I don't think it's really that competitive for DPS endurance conduits against a lot of them, like if you compare it to the good endurance conduits. And the potency one here, I mean, I don't know what kind of uptime you're looking at on this thing, but again, it's it's primary stat. It is a reasonable amount, but I don't think this is going to compete with most good primary or most good like BIS potency conduits.
Your conduits suck. It's such a bad.
Yeah, I'm always hesitant to like have an opinion on these before they launch the patch because it's always a chance that they just get tuned really far in one direction and you never know until it's live or even maybe a few weeks after it's live. But these could have a big impact, but I also agree that the pool getting larger from upgrading everything to a random 252 conduit, that is awful. Have you guys even upgraded all your 226 conduits? I have not.
Don't
I have
question
one
me.
on my main, yeah, which is a demon hunter and has less conduits, but it was done like 4 months ago. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
dude,
mean,
me and my 4 fucking specs.
the
Yeah,
good
good
news
luck.
Yeah,
is
druids
you,
are screwed.
you're not actually behind if you don't have all your stuff at 226, because upgrading conduits to 226 is like really easy to do next patch. You get items to do up to 226 just from like killing mobs in the Maw in
That's good.
Korthia.
Yeah,
Okay,
but still, it's a lot of
yeah,
RNG.
I don't know. I don't know. Boring conduits being added, diluting the pool, and not being particularly interesting or cool is, I think, bad. But it's not like the conduit system was good without them, so it's not like
Yeah.
something good is being made bad. It's just a bland system becomes blander.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's okay that it's bland because it's so, I don't know. It's so
I
boring and
I
so
do kind of wish they
uninteresting.
just made them good, right? Like just made these Archive of the Titans tier, and then it's just like, oh, okay, now I've got my good conduit that drops from the raid or whatever,
But
and everybody
but
has one.
Dratnus, then if it was Archive of the Titans tier and scaled only inside of Raid or something like that, then we would run out of conduit energy from swapping
Switching
back
between
and
M
forth.
plus and raid one. Oh my
Yeah.
god,
then we would expose their fatal flaw in the conduit energy system, Dratnus.
a conduit energy, a flawed system. I don't know what you're talking about.
That can't be that one. Yeah.
Let's move on to tip of the week, and then we will get into dungeon discussion, which is the main topic this week. There's a lot of dungeon discussion to get to. I kind of have two little tips of the week here, and I've also donated one to Tettle, so I've had a lot of good tips come in, a lot from listeners actually. One is from Mina, who suggested, if you're interested, this is related to our last week topic. If you want to look on Warcraft logs for a log to look at that doesn't have a bunch of power infusions and stuff, you can sort by the buffs column on the page, and then see all of the parses that just don't have any, power infusion or stuff. And so you can make sure that you're not taking any, clues about what you're supposed to do from people that just have infinite haste because they've got 10 power infusions or whatever.
And what if you're playing a Shadow Priest and you are the Power Infusioner?
Yeah, so
And
if you're playing a Shadow Priest, you'd sort and you'd look at the ones that have 2 buffs or whatever, 3. But they presumably all the good parses will have their own PIs.
yeah.
My other tip of the week is about leveling, which is if you're leveling up any characters to get ready for the next patch or whatever, you want to play the next patch on something new, which I've been doing a bit of. First off, my first piece of advice is pick up probably 2 gathering professions. Unless you have like a profession you really like, I'd pick up herbalism and mining. You get a lot of experience from just tapping those nodes along the way, and they're worth a little bit of gold. My second piece of advice is figure out which covenant you're going to be, and then do the side quests in that zone. Even so, regardless of whether you're doing Threads of Fate or not, there's a lot of stuff that's like gated behind side quests, particularly for covenants. Like if you're a Kyrian person and you want to be able to get there's some companions that are like gated behind doing the side quests in Bastion. So just do those while you're leveling. They're good XP as well, and that's something that you can take care of while you're leveling, anyways. So that's my 2 little tips if anybody's leveling up any characters for 9.1. Okay, Trell, what is your tip of the week?
So I don't really have a great tip this week, but you can save a little bit of soul ash for the next patch because the week 1, if they don't change anything for now, you may have to reforge a legendary, and that's because of the domination sockets and which pieces they're on your gear. You may have a legendary that's already in a head slot, like for Windwalker Monk in my situation, I'll have to transfer that head slot to my waist for my legendary, so then I have an open head slot for the domination sockets. So I'm just having like 5,000 soul ash on hand to recreate a legendary, unless they actually add something to reforge the legendary that might not be needed. A lot of people have been asking for that, but we'll see if they actually do. So save a little bit of soul ash. After week 1, it shouldn't matter because Jarnos and I were talking right before the show about how you can basically just save infinite soul ash because of the new soul ash currency that's coming out. But just for the first week, you may want to have a little bit.
Yeah, so you basically will have enough soul ash to craft whatever ranks 1 through 4 legendaries you want. But if you commit any soul cinders to upgrading something to rank 5 or 6, and it's in one of your domination socket slots, that's probably a mistake. So probably don't do that. The domination slots are head, shoulders, and chest for every armor type, and then 2 more slots that change based on which armor type you are. So if you're a cloth user, they're wrists and waists. If you're a leather user, they're hands and feet. If you're a mail user, they're waists and feet. And if you're a plate wearer, it's wrists and hands. So those slots will have domination sockets for the rage drops in those slots, and you're going to want to not have your legendary be in those slots because you can't add domination sockets to it. So yeah, what they're doing is they're making it so every legendary can be crafted into like 3 slots now next patch, or almost all of them, which means that every legendary should have a slot you can craft it in where that won't be a problem. You should be able to put it on your cloak or whatever that never has a domination socket. But make sure you don't use your soul cinders to upgrade your helmet in the on week 2 or whatever, and then week 3 you get your cool helmet drop from the raid that has a domination socket, and you're like, oh no, what have I done?
Yeah, that'd be unfortunate. Also, there's notable BOE slots for each armor type as well. So if you want to buy BOEs earlier in progression, then you want to avoid relocating your legendary to that slot as well, if possible.
Yes, the BOEs are.
Shit, hold on.
So here's an interesting thing as well. The BOEs slots have overlap with one of those domination slots for each armor type, except for leather. Leather gets the 2 BOE slots and the 5 domination socket slots in 7 total different gear slots. So you can have both of your BOEs and all of your domination sockets taken care of without there being an issue.
What's the slots for leather?
Leather is legs and wrists for the BOEs, and for the domination sockets, they are hands and feet in addition to head, shoulder, chest.
So now I have to dodge the minefield one way or the other. So I have to craft my legendary. My legendary is either legs or feet.
So either way you're in trouble. Aren't they adding a 3rd slot for your new legendary though? That's most legendaries are getting a 3rd place you can craft them next patch.
Yeah. I don't know. Yes, I read about that you're getting a 3rd place that you can craft them. I don't know where it is, but yeah.
Hopefully your 3rd one's like cloak or something, or ring maybe.
A lot of them have been cloaks and rings don't have domination sockets or BOEs next raid, so those are safe spots. But it's annoying because you want to craft in the highest stat budget slot you can find. Right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I'd rather have it on the fucking pants nonetheless, because like it'll eventually like. Before prog is even over for me, it will still be high. It will be higher item level than the BOE.
Well, before prog is over, I mean, it's like 5 weeks before we get rank 6 legendaries that are higher eye level than the mythic BOEs. I don't know. Mythic BOEs can have.
It'll be close for my guild, I guess. I mean, normally we rate about like 6 to 8 weeks. I think is
okay. So yeah, you'll get it by the end of prog. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a cool, exciting loot system that has a ton of very cool implications, particularly if you're a Mythic Plus only gear person. Look forward to... You're going to need to do at least Heroic Raid to get your domination sockets, is the TLDR of how that's going to work. So, I'm sorry about that for Mythic Plus only players. I'm going to make a video about all this Shard of Domination and BOE implications and stuff for loot, so stay tuned.
I really don't mind it. It's just it's just like not even like that great of a system for how much of a hassle it is. Okay, if it was like super sick and it was also equally as much of a hassle of like, all right, I have to recraft my legendary and do all this other garbage. All right, that's fine. Like I kind of get it. It's cool. This is just like, yeah, you gain like 6% damage from these sockets. And you can't socket legendaries, by the way.
Yeah, you can't domination socket legendaries.
And you can't domination socket item BOEs, by the way. And they're also only from raid.
Yes. Also, the best shard effect is M+ as well. Okay, so the strongest shards after the most recent round of nerfs is your damage is increased by 4.5% for 20 seconds after attacking an enemy you have not yet damaged, which is like a quintessential M+ power. Like, this is just going to be huge uptime in M+. Really, and then the one that like looked really sick in raid, your damage is increased by, this used to be 8% when you have 50% or more health than your target, has been nerfed down to 3%. So I don't know. I don't know. This is a little bit of an old article now, so I don't know what the actual final numbers are. I assume that we will have all that information soon, but I think this is the most recent info on what these shards look like. And yeah, I mean, you need to do raids to, I think, both get and upgrade the shards and get the loot that has the sockets to put them in. And these all function in M+ and PvP as well. The set bonuses only work in the raid, but everything else works in everywhere.
Yeah, them working in PvP is such a wild.
Okay,
I don't know, man.
here's my question to you. How many weeks before they make them 50% effective in PvP, and then how many weeks before they nerf them again in PvP?
Yeah.
I think
Okay,
it's
okay,
probably
okay.
about 1 week before they nerf it the first time, and then probably
Yep.
3 weeks before they hit it again, and it's down to like 20% effectiveness.
Right there with you. I'm right, dude. Those are the expected dates for me too. Maybe it's like 1 and 4, but
Maybe,
yeah,
yeah.
it's certainly after the first week. Whenever those people who are geared with heroic gear like load into the arena and fucking just murder the rank one
That will be
PvP.
me. I'll be collecting my 2100 from the PvPers using these items. I'll be collecting that week 1 while I can.
Yeah, exactly. It's just such a I don't know, man. It's a
So
wild
unfortunate.
system.
Who could have seen this coming?
How could we possibly have learned from the past to realize that this was going to happen again and again
It just
and
it's
again?
it's nice when these new systems come out because we have this backlog of like we know exactly how it's going to happen because they've done this 5 times now, so we know exactly what is going to happen in in PvP.
Azurite powers, they come out for 1 week, fucking just broken. 1 week later, all of them nerfed by 50% in PvP. You're like, how could we have possibly have foreseen this?
Corruption as well.
Yep, corruption. Literally all just comes out blank. 1 week in, 50% nerf. 3 weeks later, just another like 50% nerf on everything. You're like, all right, epic.
All right, Tettles, what is your clip of the week? Which is actually kind of a tip of the week this week because you couldn't find a clip, and so I gave you this tip.
We have run out of clips of the week. I was looking through the WoW directory and didn't have shit, so Dratno's coming in hot to save me. So yeah, one of our listeners, his name is Martin. He DM'd us after we had talked about the shards of Halkias. We're gonna talk about them again in a little bit. Basically, the shards of Halkias are kind of getting changed to where you can't really reliably outrange them, but apparently you can line of sight them. And there are definitely some locations that are better than others for being able to line of sight to the shards of Halkias. And Mr. Martin gave us this great picture that shows some of the spots that you can line the shards. Obviously, some are infinitely more practical than the others.
Yeah, the
Those
red ones are the practical ones, and the yellow ones are like you got to clear a bunch of trash or send these shards on like an adventure to get to them.
It's more like, why the fuck is the shard there kind of question for those yellow
I mean,
ones.
you might be doing it. You know, lining this is potentially pretty powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
But
I mean, if you can't range them, that's definitely the play once you get to higher keys. Those things do so much damage.
Yeah, so we'll talk about actually. I mean, we can just talk about the Shard of Halkias now.
just pivot in.
Pivot to the main topic and talk about what they're doing to Shard of Halkias. So, in addition to a bunch of other Trash changes, one of them is that the Shards of Halkias are getting their range increased on Thrash from 40 to 60 yards. So it's no longer going to be like Moonkins take a step back and are not getting hit anymore. But the damage is getting nerfed by about 30% as well on the Thrash, 28% or something. So they're
That is
making
good,
it
at least, yeah.
easy or harder to kite them, harder to outrange them, but less punishing if you choose not to. So the design intent is for us to just take that damage and fight these things. In practice, whether or not that just means we do something slightly more degenerate to avoid taking damage from it is the open question. And definitely the line of sight strategy, I think, is a likely thing that will be experimented with, and we'll see if it's worth. Because even at 30% less damage, those things truck, right?
I mean,
Yeah. I mean, if they're going to hit all 5 players, let's say they're not line of sighting, they're going to do a lot of damage in that
Yeah.
keys. And usually with season scaling, stuff's going to hit a little bit harder relative to last season anyway. Even though it got nerfed by 30%, it's still going to be a big chunk.
I think too, it's like, I don't. Okay, so basically, as it currently stands, only one melee player can realistically get hit with the whole. Okay, with the Holy Paladin, it's just like one melee plus the Holy Paladin are like the only like real people that are getting hit. And if you're in there and you know your mage is in melee and he's not pressing alter time or some other shit, he actually like cots almost 10 times out of 10 because the healer can't be able to keep like multiple people topped once you start getting to a high enough level. So yeah, I could see this being a pretty viable strategy. I wonder if it's worth to just like stand it, like just as a ranged, just dip out to 60 yards. That may be better than just like lining in and out kind of thing too.
Yeah. I mean, a line is... my guess is that line will be the easiest way to deal with them. The problem is that, like, often these pulls include other mobs as well, so, like, What do you do? Maybe you just duck behind the line, you leave the thing thrashing there, and you pull the other stuff around and keep DPSing it.
Yeah, that's what I
I
was
don't know.
thinking. You just keep burning the rest of the pack and then focus the
you,
shard while
Do a
you
little
have line of
dance.
sight.
Yeah, you do some dancing to in between the ticks, like the dental drill.
Oh, yeah, love that.
You really got to
Okay.
show off your skills here for how good you are.
So let's go back to the regularly scheduled order we had planned for this, and we'll get to the other trash changes in a bit. The first big set of changes, though, for M Plus that we want to talk about is the Tormented Affix, actually, which is getting some changes. I actually just made a video about these as well, which is that all 4 of the lieutenants have gotten buffed or changed. The Sagadon guy has gotten quite a big set of changes to make him less of something you kite as a tank and more of something that you tank as a tank, which is going to be fun to deal with. So now, if crushed isn't able to hit you, it'll grip you in and then crush you. So you can't kite this stupid thing. And then also has AOE damage, and then it has the grip everybody in, and then you have a root that you can kill to be able to run away from it, and otherwise you get hit by Massive Smash, which is going to be a one-shot on like probably even like a 15 or a 10 level. So
Yeah,
that
he grips you in, and then he has like a really, really long cast before he does the big AoE. So you
Yeah.
do have a lot of time to break those roots, but it's kind of epic, I guess.
it is actually pretty cool, yeah. Then the Executioner, which is the one with the healing reduction aura, got a Wave of Terror ability, which you just stand on your friend and it doesn't do anything. If you don't, though, it's a uninterruptible AoE fear that can't be dispelled, so make sure you stand within 6 yards of a friend for that one. Aura's Cold Heart got some swirlies to dodge, and Incinerator Arkeloth got the aura buff on the already damaging Soulforge Flames by another 33%. And Inferno, a large AoE that hits all players, doing about 15k on a plus 10 key, which the scaling on that is quite terrifying as we go to a higher level than plus 10.
Yeah, that's a pride right there, just ticking on the group. Especially once you get to like plus 20, ooh, that's gonna hurt a lot.
That's that pulsing AoE damage can certainly be brutal.
It is kind of prideful plus big AoE cast as well. So this is gonna be a scary mob on high key, which led to some discussion on Twitter between Moofsy, Yoda, and JB about about this thing. Where Moofsy is basically like, oh, it's cool that they're making these more impactful, giving more mechanics to these things, and Yoda's on the side of, I don't like this. I wish that they made it so that we could pull more trash with these and not making them like prideful, where this is the hardest part of the dungeon. It's just the numbers check on these mini bosses. And then JB has this tweet, which was the basis of me making a whole video about this. Basically, was maybe Cap Lieutenant scaling at 15, like Bursting and Grievous. And the more I think about this, the more I think they should just absolutely do this with like a lot of affixes.
I think that's a great idea.
I agree, and it's like the biggest issue with these seasonal fixes, like the biggest issue with Prideful, the biggest issue with oh god, what was the name of the obelisks? Awakened. The biggest issue with Prideful, the biggest issue with Awakened is like the opportunity cost to be able to kill those mobs. Like it takes so much time to be able to kill them, and yeah, while the gain can be substantial in some cases, you unlock skips, you gain a Prideful buff, it just doesn't scale with the dungeon level like that well. Because like more often than not, it's just like a flat amount gained, and it doesn't scale, because basically you're still at 226 item level whether you're doing the Prideful on a 15 or you're still at 226 item level if you're doing the Prideful on a 25. Except the Prideful is like 4 times as hard on a 25 as it is on a 15, and you're going to be killing the trash pack that is after the Pride. Like the damage, your damage isn't going up by any any amount. It's just the trash has less HP, and so I do certainly agree that they should be looking into keeping these seasonal fixes more like capped at 15.
Yeah, it's interesting because the discussion between Moofsy and Yoda is basically like, Moofsy on wanting affixes to look like Prideful did, right, where the mobs are interesting, cool to fight, have stuff going on, and like a plus 15 key where the mobs are, relevant and impactful. And Yoda's wanting stuff to be like Reaping, right? Where Reaping is just, you pull it with stuff, you can do a lot of cool things. But I think the JB synthesis here is basically, let's make the affixes work like Prideful does up to 15, and then like Reaping did in 20s, right? Like Reaping was in 25s. And I think that's exactly the right way to go about doing these affixes. Because I do think that, if you were doing a weekly 15 key, you're never pulling trash with affixes, right? In a weekly key, that's not something that tanks ever do. That's like an extremely rare thing for pug tanks to ever even want to do, because if you do it and somebody dies of something, which because there's a lot of hard stuff going on, then you're going to get flamed, right? So there's no reason you're ever going to do that. So in those groups, it makes a lot of sense that they want these affixes to be interesting and to have, to be interesting enough and difficult enough that when you fight them by themselves, they're cool and fun. But for the high keys, we don't want the dungeon to be a question of, okay, when are we fighting Inquisitor Arcoleth? Or Incinerator Arcoleth? How do we make sure we have our prideful, our bloodlust, everything for that pull? How are we going to survive this, right? We got to cut these classes that can't heal through this. We got to cut these hunters that can't survive this aura. Where the whole dungeon is now about Incinerator Arcoleth. I don't think that's so good for high keys.
I'm so down to fight him by himself. Like that. Let me make it very clear. It's fine if you like design him in a way where design these mobs in a way where they have to be fought by themselves. That's fine. You're also putting a bunch of interesting mechanics on them. It's fine if they're like forced to be fought by themselves in some manner. It's not okay if the dungeon goes from, okay, how are we supposed to deal with Echelon? How are we supposed to deal with Halkias? How are we supposed to deal with like Boss? How are we supposed to deal with this big ass trash pull? And then it turns into, how am I supposed to deal with seasonal mob A, B, and C? And then just deal with them, and that is like the only point of the dungeon that you're even worried about. It's like, because it turned into, yo, how are we supposed to deal with this prideful? Oh, we're leaping off the fucking edge. Oh, we're invis potioning it. Oh, we're death running it or something, right? And you're like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah, it sucks because like plus 19 keys were so much more fun than plus 25 keys, because like in the plus 19 key it's like, oh yeah, we'll just kill the pride, this is gonna be fun, and then we'll have this big pride buff and we'll go fight this boss. And on plus 25 it's like, okay, everybody spawn the pride, stand in the right spot, we're invis potting, oh the pride pulled, oh it's over, right? Or like, okay, everybody jump off the edge, we're going back to
kill
start.
The seasonal affix.
Yeah, it's like man,
it's frustrating. And I think the big is we all would like the affixes to affect the dungeon a little bit less. Not just the tormented affix. Maybe it's just my opinion, but that way it gives you more freedom to pull more things together. It gives you more freedom for creativity and more comps, like we were saying, like the hunters not being able to survive the aura. Like anything that makes the affixes affect everything a little bit less is good in my opinion, because you can just do so much more.
Yeah,
different routing.
The thing that to me made this JB tweet is so great though is that like the problem with making the affixes just nerfed is that that does make like the plus 10 keys more boring, right? Plus 10 keys I think are strong because the affixes are impactful in them and change week to week. So I really think that this is actually the perfect formula, is just reduce or remove the scaling past like 15 or 18 or 20 or whatever for affixes, especially the seasonal ones, but they should consider doing that for a lot of the affixes IMO.
I mean, dude, you can even make it have aggressive damage at a 15. Like it doesn't have to be like it doesn't have to be easy at a 15.
Right.
It just shouldn't scale to a fucking obscene level. Like it is allowed to be hard at a 15 and like make pugs have to kind of deal with that kind of thing.
I think that's a good seasonal affix. I think that the weakness of reaping, which we didn't see because we were just doing those high keys where it was just the best affix ever, was that like in a plus 15 key you would spawn your reaping wave, you wouldn't pull anything extra with it, you would kill the reaping wave and you'd be like, that was easy, right? And like that is actually bad for the affixes to be like that. So yeah, I don't know. Genius tweet by JB. They should do this. I'm firmly on this team here. This is exactly the strat.
Agreed.
Okay. Let's talk about boss tuning. A wide set of boss nerfs have largely come out, which Tettles and I we did a little video on these as well.
We're doing domination sockets next week. Do we know?
I don't know.
All right. Maybe the world will never know.
So Dealer Zyxa is getting a pretty big nerf to the Arcane Lightning base damage, and Arcane Vulnerability is a higher percentage, but it's only affecting Arcane Lightning damage, not all Arcane damage. So these two nerfs combine to make Arcane Lightning probably about as lethal, a little bit less, and the combination of Arcane Lightning and other mechanics way less lethal.
Yeah, I think that's overall good.
Yeah, that boss needed a nerf. I think that like how they're buffing up the vulnerability and also like changing it from being all damage to just damage from the lightning I think that that's also like right in line with what they should have been doing with this boss. It really felt like they were kind of in tune with like what needed to be changed about this one.
This one as well, this was a boss I think that was really band-aided by Prideful because it was actually a pretty short boss fight. So you had Prideful for like almost the whole duration of it. So you could just kill this thing with Prideful and Lust before the mechanics overwhelmed you, even on pretty high keys. So it makes sense with Prideful going away that this is one they're going to want to take another look at. So I'm glad they've done. I think this is a really, really great boss to target and a really great set of changes to it. And then Hakar has received some changes, which Mandel here has done a thorough inspection of, which is the Blood Barrage is now a simple spell that fires missiles while the barrier's up, so it's not something that's like 14 seconds and then afterwards the boss is doing other mechanics while still shielded, which is how it used to work. And other than that, yeah, nothing else happening during Blood Barrier. Hakar no longer gains energy when Blood Barrier is up, as well, is the big news here. Which means you don't have this experience that you would have, like say you go into a 20 Tyrannical DOS in patch 9.0, by the time the Blood Barrier is down, Hakar's at 70% energy already, and it's about ready to Blood Barrier again, and you're like, man.
Yeah, well, also too, you'll have like 5 Sons of Hakar because he's sub 20% HP, and then all the Sons of Hakar spawn again, and then he just eats them, and you're just like, that's a big fucking shield. What am I supposed to do? And you're out of cooldowns, and your pride is gone, and your bloodlust is faded, and you're sitting there like, I guess we wait for our second Ashen Hollow to come back up before the boss dies.
Yeah, it really made the importance to like nuke through the Blood Barrier, to maybe even think about waiting for the boss to get to 100 energy again during a Blood Barrier, which is like a really dumb play pattern. So I think that in particular, this change is really fantastic because it doesn't change the cool and hard parts about the fight in lower keys, but it removes this sort of compounding interest, double whammy problem in high keys where the Blood Barrier takes a really long time and then that makes the next Blood Barrier almost happen instantly. So I love this set of changes. I think Hakar was a great boss to target, and this is a great set of nerfs to deliver to it.
Yeah, thank goodness.
Interesting thing about these nerfs as well is these are two of the bosses that we will have not full anima powers for, right? At least one of them, presumably, unless we get all 4 of our anima powers early in DOS, which maybe will be the strat. I think it probably will. But
I think it probably will, yeah.
A default press W strat through the dungeon. You know, one of these is the first boss and one of these is the third. So if you're just doing that strat next patch, these will be some of the bosses you don't have full anima power set up for, right? In terms of the metagame, I actually do think what you will do in DOS is before you've pulled any boss, you will go and get all 4 of your anima powers for, like, if you're actually trying to optimize. But I think that the default press W strategy through the dungeon, it's very important to target these in particular because they will be ones that we don't have all the anima powers for.
It really depends on how difficult the timer is going to be still. I mean, that dungeon's timer is still pretty aggressive, even
double nerfed, yeah.
Yeah, like the timer has been changed multiple times, and that timer is still super tight. Can you afford to really go to all 3 of these lieutenants and then backtrack that much in the dungeon?
Well,
I would say probably.
I think 3 of the lieutenants are on the ring itself, and then 1 is like tucked into the Mechagon area a tiny bit.
I was about to say, yeah. They just moved a lot of lieutenants the last few days.
Okay.
Like, I just walked in the halls earlier, and 2 of them were down like right next to Halkias instead of one being at the first shard. You know, so I don't know if they're still the same in the other side that we were talking about, but we'll have to see maybe next week when we review it or something.
Yeah, that's definitely something to keep an eye on, and something my only knowledge is from those screenshots from like 2 weeks ago. So I don't know if they've moved them. Amarth and Necrotic Wake, another boss that you won't have all your anima powers for, has been slightly nerfed on the Tortured Echoes damage. It's not a big deal, but I think it's a nice one to target as well. I think that a lot of the Necrotic Wake bosses have this problem where like you really need to use some weapons on them, and then if you wipe and you don't have a weapon, it's like, ugh. So I think this is a nice one to actually nerf a little bit. And Sanguine Depths, Crixus nerfs to the AoE from soaking the orbs, and nerfs to the Juggernaut Rush damage as well, which, man, this boss is going to be a hugely, like, relative to Prideful, you're going to have 0 or 1, I think, anima powers when you fight Crixus. So compared to the other bosses where you might have 4 anima powers, versus having a prideful buff, this is one of the ones that's going to get the most buffed by the new affix. I think when you factor that in, it will probably still be harder next season than it was this season, but it's a really important one, therefore, for them to be delivering these kind of nerfs too, because it was such a hard boss already.
How many times has this been nerfed now? I feel like the Sanguine Depths bosses have been nerfed like 3 or 4 times each already, and it's looking like it's going to be another Shadow of Zul where it's just like 12 nerfs by the end of the expansion.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, Crixus is still, I think, one of the hardest bosses in Shadowlands, just in terms of like its punishing numbers wise, and it's got some mechanics that kind of wipe you instantly if you screw them up.
Dude, that boss is I feel like that boss is pretty brutal. It's also super basic, but it's so. I think it's the tuning. Normally, bosses like that are undertuned, like that priest, the priestess from Ataldazar. Bosses that are so simple, are just critically fucking undertuned for some stupid reason, and it's just Crixus is like, no more. We must ruin them, and you're just like, why is this a boss like this?
Massive AoE damage. Next ability, massive AoE damage.
And then finally,
Great boss.
Zero the Underhanded is back in Theater Pain, so welcome back. We missed you. Glad to have you here.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know. Why did they remove her is the real question.
I don't know, man. I think there's not really many changes they can make to the first boss that like really will change it from being probably the easiest boss in that dungeon anyway. Like even adding Zero back in.
Whenever they removed it,
yeah.
we kind of clowned on them. We were just like, what the fuck are they removing this for? Like, what are they doing? And now they just brought it back. You're like, okay.
I assume there was just some bug or whatever that they wanted to fix with it. But yeah, she's coming back and she's doing like 5% more damn. So cool.
Oh shit!
Oh my goodness!
Watch out for when it randomly stuns the tank and someone else dies.
True.
Wait, can she stun the tank?
Yeah, it happens very rarely. I think. I mean, maybe they fixed this. Maybe that was part of their thing.
Maybe, yeah.
But...
Maybe it's something to do with like where she spawns. So like if she spawns so that the tank's the only one in range or something. I have no idea how she works.
You know where she spawns, right? She's like off to the left, like on the outer ring, like in stealth.
Yeah, so cool.
I've been too close to her before, and my Convoke has gone into her. And I'm just like, how is this even a thing?
So cool. So thematic. Okay. We have some trash nerfs as well. Nerfs to Sanguine Depths mobs. The Remnants of Fury, which is not the Remnants of the puddle dropping ones, but the other one. They've slightly nerfed the dot on Explosive Anger and Explosive Rage. And dramatically nerfed the AoE on Expiration. Still, you're going to want to be dispelling these, I'm pretty sure. I think that the nerf here on the damage is not going to be enough that you're not going to want to dispel this.
That debuff 2 shotting you as it currently stands was outrageous, and I'm glad that they have decided that shit is not okay. It certainly did need a nerf, but...
I think you're still going to be dispelling this one, though. Although it does increase your damage done while it's up as well, so...
Oh yeah, thank God.
Exciting. And then they nerfed Severing Slice again.
Yes,
which is this one. It used to be the AoE. They nerfed like how slow it casts or something. They nerfed how much damage it did, and now they've made it so it's not an AoE. It just targets the target. I don't know if it's going to be like a fervent.
If that means.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I wonder if that means you can't kite anymore and just outrange it, because that was definitely the play before. Like if you had any way to get out of it, you wanted to run away, so it just hit nothing.
Mm-hmm. I don't know exactly how this will behave. It'll matter a lot. You know, whether you can still outrange it, whether it recasts when it gets to you, whether it just casts on your rogue that's nearby.
Now it's a fervent strike, apparently, according to our chat.
Okay, so yeah, cool. I'll be having my trees take that fervent. Don't mind if I do. And then the Halls of Atonement thing. We already talked about the Shard of Halkia's Thrash change. Wicked Bolt has also been changed here.
Okay, why would they buff Wicked Bolt?
Buff to Wicked Bolt, which does leave one wondering exactly why they would do that.
Are aware that the trash is the hardest part of that dungeon.
Well, okay.
And specifically those obliterators are fucking very difficult as well.
I think that like Halls of Atonement trash is easier trash than the other dungeons. So I think it makes sense to make Halls of Atonement trash like harder. But if you ask me like what are the mechanics that cause wipes in Halls of Atonement pulls, I'd be like, okay, the dog meleeed the tank, Wicked Bolt cast got through on the tank. Like, those are the things already that are wiping you. So I think that what they should do is add some more things that will cause you problems, like buff some of those the abilities that tanks are ignoring right now, and not make the one that you already are like, please somebody kick this, into just even more pain.
Yeah, I'm gonna feel bad for the tanks. Like, let's say we have a tank player that's moving off of Demon Hunter onto a different tank, and they're getting this buff for Halls of Atonement at the same time. They're gonna hurt.
Oh yeah,
those bolts are gonna kill you.
Yep. So I
apparently we got breaking news on the show, Dratnos, that apparently there's been a change also to the mini boss in Plaguefall.
Oh my goodness gracious! Is there a post or something?
No.
Okay.
No. The apparently the Mimosas and Mythic Plus people were doing PTR keys and they went into a Plaguefall. Charles, do you know more about this?
Yeah. So I was listening to them right before the show. Apparently, only the first set of Plague Borers spawns, and then they just don't spawn anymore. I don't think. And I think the first set doesn't even explode. So I think like the entire strat of just using Plague Borers is gone, if that's true.
Okay.
I think there was a build yesterday. I think Swishy said there was a build Tuesday, I think, and then also a second build in 1 week. And so that must have been the second build changes that went into that, and there's no article yet or something.
I am fine with this. Plague Borers are dumb.
Plague Borers are dumb. I'm sure he'll go test it later, kind of thing, and we'll get a detailed post about the problem. I don't hate it. That dungeon needs a lot of fucking nerfs though to correspond with no bombing.
We'll see, yeah, because that was a dungeon that was like defeated. The strategy there was entirely contingent on the Plague Borers like doing a lot of it for you. Yeah, so like they have.
I don't mind it.
I'm sure that it will, with Plague Borers gone, we'll get some rigorous testing of what the actual pain points are in that dungeon. There's a lot of those really hard pulls though, where it's like, man, those are going to be hard to actually deal with them. But I'm happy that we will. Like that's a step in the right direction. Plague Borers were dumb.
Dude, all of the trash between the first boss and the second boss, they're all fucking cursed trash packs. They're all just bad. You just don't deal with them.
All right, up next we have. Okay.
It's going to be really interesting. I mean, I think we're all happy that this strat's going away, right? What if they just removed the cannons from Toldagor one patch? Like, how wild would that have been?
God bless, dude. That would have been. I would have loved to live in that world. Do some Toldagor with the mobs pulling through the floors and pulling through the walls, and do more of those pulls. But at least I'd be fighting them, not the cannons.
They turned them into one of those like play guns that whenever you press it, it shoots out the little flag and it's just a loser on it.
That would be so funny.
I was thinking about it, like if they removed the cannons and they left the trash with like that heightened HP, because the cannons existed, I think they would have had to change that eventually, right? So hopefully that's going to be the case here in Plaguefall. I mean, season 2 is a good time to make a big change because they have time to like realize what else needs to be changed later.
Plaguefall in 9.0, like maybe if they just took away the Plague Borers, it gets worse, right? It becomes like one of the hardest dungeons or something. But like this was a necessary change towards Plaguefall becoming a actually fun dungeon to do, and not just a Plague Borer, AFK if you're not the person dealing with the Plague Borers fast.
Yeah, seriously.
All right, we have affix nerfs as well. Storming, first up, is getting the old quadruple nerf, something usually reserved for like rogues or whatever. This is so travel slower, always travels clockwise, damage nerf to 12% health instead of 15, and the big one now despawns the first time it hits somebody. Holy moly, this is a big nerf to this affix. This is, a huge set of things, especially this fourth one, really changes how this affix is going to feel. I'm very happy about these. I think.
Yeah, that's going to be really nice. And speaking of rogues, that's actually a buff to rogues because they can pop cloak and soak a bunch of tornadoes, right, and get them out of the way.
True. It's also a buff to groups that have 3 melee DPS versus groups that have like 1 or 0, because instead of the tornadoes barreling through all 3 of your melee, now they will hit one person and then just despawn. And so it's actually, maybe arguably, it's fine to have as many or as few melee as you want on a Storming Week now, whereas before it was very much, don't bring those melee, they are bad this week. So yeah, dude. I love how this change interacts with the dynamics of like how many melee you should bring.
Honestly, yeah, storming is going to just be a great week for melee. You're going to completely forego the meta of classes and run triple melee.
Well, there's already a lot of other problems for melee, sure. The dungeons themselves. I mean, the screenshot here. There's still a
Yeah,
deadly
the
thrust being
fucking
cast in
dungeon.
this screenshot here. That you're gonna die if you get hit by one tornado and knocked into a deadly thrust. Sure, but in general, I think this is a really good
Okay.
nerf to an affix that really sucked. This was an affix that like it didn't affect you if you were ranged, and if you were melee, it was like a miserable week. And now I think it's gonna be like fine. It's gonna be a fine week.
I agree.
So, yeah, I agree. It's not the end of the world. I think it makes like some bosses that you're like pretty stationary on, like trash packs, so you have to be like super stationary on, like the angels in front of Devos, like Lord Chamberlain having to soak the telekinesis
Oh
lines. I
yeah,
think
Lord Chamberlain.
yeah, it makes all that
That's
stuff
so
just
rough.
like a lot easier. And
Oh, I guess
there's
for
a-
Lord Chamberlain, yeah, you could just have like someone pop in and soak the tornado real quick. That's not one of the two big soakers, right? That's actually really nice for that fight.
Yeah, if they wanted to buff this affix again in future, I would say that you could just make it do more damage now that it's easier to dodge and doesn't barrel through all of your melee. So I think that if they decide this was too many nerfs and they want to buff the affix, make it deal more damage. Like revert and change the direction of this nerf. Don't mess with this one. This is such a good nerf.
they would
Single player hit.
they would never go back on their word and revert a nerf to an affix, right?
So Necrotic was another affix that was we saw some nerfs to in the PTR build on Tuesday. It was discovered that it was applying on every other melee swing, and now
Oh yes, that was a good change.
in the release candidate, the newest PTR build, they reverted that for the most part. So now lieutenant mobs and bosses will have that behavior, but trash mobs will still apply Necrotic on every auto attack. For any historians here, every mob, including bosses and lieutenants, used to apply Necrotic with every swing. In BFA, they made it so bosses only do it on every other. And then with this nerf, originally it was everything does it on every other, and now it's lieutenants and bosses do it on every other, and trash do it on every swing, is how it will currently work to our knowledge. There's this cool blue post about it as well that says, hey, this is too big a nerf. The nerf was too much. But Necrotic is a little more oppressive than we want it to be, so don't be surprised if more tweaks to it hit the PTR over the next few days. Which I think that this targeting Necrotic on lieutenants is not the problem for Necrotic. I don't think lieutenants applying Necrotic half as often is really the right way to fix this thing. I don't think lieutenant mobs at all are the problem with Necrotic. But I'm really happy to see a blue post explaining where they're coming from and saying, hey, there's going to be more coming for this affix.
I'm glad they at least posted something about it. I don't know, man. Them saying that that change was too far in the other direction of making Necrotic too easy. I don't know. I felt like that nerf wasn't even enough. I'll be real with you. I felt like
Yeah, well, it definitely wasn't enough.
I felt like
like-
it needed to be nerfed further. Than they're saying that shit was not enough, and you're like, wait, hold on. They fucking gutted storming. Wait, they actually gutted storming, and then they're like, yeah, this nerf to Necrotic that most people are saying isn't even enough of a nerf to Necrotic. Yeah, no. We need to taper this one back. And you're like, what? Oh, hello?
I have a different opinion on this. I think that everybody really underestimates how much a big percentage nerf actually nerfs something. Like, Necrotic got a 50% nerf with this original thing here. 50%.
That's
Every
true.
single time you would have a Necrotic 40 stack, you would now have a 20 stack. How many times where you died in Necrotic would you have not died if you were taking half as much healing reduction? Probably a lot.
Necrotic
Like,
is still
half.
even if that is the case, even at 20 stacks or whatever, and like half as many, it is still above and beyond the hardest affix to deal with. Like,
I firmly disagree.
Yeah.
Like, how many times do you have to 50% nerf something before it stops mattering? Maybe one. Definitely, like 50% is a huge nerf. That is tremendously big.
Well- It's huge. It is big. Like I agree. It's very impactful, but it still doesn't solve the problem that having Necrotic as an affix in the key is going to take a lot longer to do that key in general than adding something like storming or inspiring or any other
Yeah.
affix. But
sorry,
like
continue.
as long as they make a different change, like I think all of us agree that if they made necrotic just expire based on each stack separately instead of all the
Oh,
stacks at
interesting.
once, so you had to kite. I think if they did something like that, it would solve it much more than a 50% nerf,
Like
because then you could naturally drop the
Iron Fur necrotic stacks. I hadn't
yes,
considered that
exactly like
possibility,
Iron
but that's a cool idea. I think that would be worth looking into. Yeah.
I think that also it's like, okay, maybe if there was a cap on the amount of healing reduction that you could also take, right?
that too.
Like
Yeah,
if you couldn't go past like 50%,
You probably
like
wouldn't though. Like in almost all cases where you got to 50% or more healing reduction last time, with them being applied half as frequently, like you would get way less stacks. I don't know, man. I'm just thinking about like every necrotic deathlog I've ever seen, and like all of them would have been delayed by at least 10 or 20 seconds if you had half as many stacks.
Okay. That's yes, I do agree, but that's from the position of you're playing necrotic the exact same as you're playing necrotic right now, right? That's not under the assumption that you're playing necrotic the same as you're playing the dungeon on a normal week. That's the
Right.
issue.
yeah.
Yes, I think that we all agree with that is the fundamental problem is how you have to play necrotic just at a base level is not great.
Well, every time I think about necrotic, the pain points of it, I think about the worst pulls on it. Like everyone who's tanked has probably done the first pull of necrotic wake, or anything in that first area of necrotic wake on necrotic. It's so hard to drop stacks because those little soldiers will just leap to you over and over and over, and usually segmented, not all at once. And so, even if they apply twice as or they apply half the stacks they did before, you're still going to be at 40 stacks trying to drop, running away from the group, and then you'll refresh to 41 and then keep going instead of like 80. But still, the problem exists.
Yeah, I'm with you that it doesn't fix the whole thing. I think that like there's not much in the game that you can't 50% nerf and make it a lot easier. I don't think that
I agree with that.
I think that almost like with the exception of maybe the very worst necrotic pulls that were previously like the best strategy against them is still hard would go to pulls where the best strategy against them makes them really easy, right?
I agree, but
It's still a dumb
okay,
strategy though of kiting that aggressively.
fundamentally the argument is bolstering and necrotic are too impactful from how you would do the dungeon on like a week-to-week basis, and probably should be changed to reflect something like that because they're just too much in the camp of like I'm affecting how you were playing the dungeon.
Well, I have good news for you about bolstering because bolstering has gotten nerfed on the newest
In the worst
build.
way possible.
When any non-boss enemy dies, its death cry empowers nearby allies, increasing their maximum health by 15% and damage by 20%. It used to be health and damage by 20%, but now health only 15% when a bolstering stack is applied.
So we've talked about that a lot on the show. I think all of us would say, please give bolstering a duration of like 20 seconds or something, and just have it expire, so that you can still do bolstering pulls. That would help, and you can lose 20 seconds and it'd be fun. Like if you screwed up, you'd lose 20 seconds of the dungeon and that'd be fine. But it wouldn't be like a permanent disaster where you have a sky high pig from Waycrest Manor or a plague boar that's like a mile high chasing everyone through the dungeon until you wipe, forever.
Yeah, I would say that again, numerical changes. I would say this is probably more impactful than people who just assume this will do absolutely nothing. But this isn't going to change too many of those bolstering checkmate situations into not checkmates. Like a lot of the time with bolstering, the problem is like, oh, this mob has 60% health and 4 bolstering stacks. Like, let's just wipe it. And I think that's probably going to be about the same.
It's a very similar situation in necrotic where it's just like the problem isn't like this nerf doesn't affect the issue of like what makes bolstering really dumb. Like this
For the
like
record,
okay, yeah, this isn't a bad nerf. Like I mean, I'll take it, right? I'll take any crumb of a nerf that you give me. Like I will literally take anything. But there's such bad disproportionate like effects between some of these affixes. Volcanic doesn't do shit. Sanguine, okay, yeah, you have to aggressively kite mobs out of sanguine puddles, but like that makes sense with how you're dealing with it. Bolstering is a permanent thing that is like there's not a ton that you can do to play around it if you accidentally mess it up. Like with sanguine, oh yeah, I've healed the mob. That sucks. That was dumb of me.
Here's
but then it's just like don't do that.
Here's Subcreation's affix ease tier list of all the affixes. This is like statistically generated on mplus.subcreation.net from all the affix, from high keys, so 16 to 27 in this case. the 2 hardest weeks by this analysis are the 2 Woolstring weeks, and 2 of the 3 hardest weeks are the 2 Necrotic weeks. So definitely these are affixes that should be examined,
Dude, what the fuck is
scrutinized
bolstering
harshly.
necrotic? What
Yeah,
the fuck is bolstering necrotic?
Bolstering Necrotic is a little bit of
That week is cursed.
a weird one.
Who sat the Okay, never mind. I'm not even gonna get into it. But it's just like, what?
And these affixes have been around forever. Like these 2 affixes are some of the longest ones in existence, and they still are the most egregious. And
right, which
they
again,
they just won't nerf them enough.
like I wonder to what extent it's like, hey, we like that a bolstering week feels really different in my weekly 10 key, right? But like what it's doing to the week to somebody trying to like push score or whatever is okay, we don't play this week. This is a dumb week. We don't play this. So I wonder if there's a solution that could involve these affixes also not scaling past 15, and then everybody, then they still can be impactful in those low weekly keys where it doesn't matter that they're like 20% harder than any other week.
I mean, necrotic and bolstering don't scale, right?
Well, they do, right? Because like 20% more health and damage on a higher HP mob, right?
Oh,
so like you
okay.
could,
So you're saying there'd be like a cap?
yeah,
Oh,
you could
okay.
cap it so that it's like adding the same health and damage on a 16 as it does on a 15.
Yeah, like
And
a
so
flat
it
amount of
becomes
health instead of a
relatively less
percentage.
impactful, and
see
it
that.
stays the same in terms of absolute impact. Because right now it's relatively
hate
the same, and the absolute impact increases.
I don't hate that. There's a lot of different changes I would implement first, but if that's the line that they went, I would sit there and be like, all right, whatever. That's like,
I'm just trying to think of like why they haven't gutted these affixes, and I keep coming back to like it must be that they like the way that they feel in plus 10 keys, right? And like I want to, rather than like trying to make the argument like, hey, make the change that benefits me and not the one for the plus 10 players, I'm trying to come up with solutions that like give both parties what they want.
I just think that like bolstering and bolstering mismanagement, regardless of key level, is still just brutal. And you're like,
Yeah.
the amount of times that you accidentally body pull a pack and you just have like one bolstered ass mob, and you're like, all right, we're wiping. Even in a 10, you just sit there and you're like, all right, jump off, we're wiping.
Yeah.
It's literally faster than to kill a mob with like 10 million health. That's killable, but it's going to take so long. It's just, there should be a better way.
So yeah, I mean, any nerf is a good nerf to see for the affix, but it is sad when they choose a nerf like this because you're like, oh, this probably makes it less likely that we will see a good nerf to this affix anytime soon. But hopefully we're wrong on that. And also, Raging got nerfed to 75% increased damage instead of 100. I don't really have a strong opinion about this.
Yeah, that was like, eh. I don't know. I think Raging should have another way of dealing with it rather than just having a Soothe, because it's a very binary affix. Maybe it has like a long duration, so there's another way, but I don't know what would be a better fix.
Interesting. Maybe it's like a cast
that's really the
that they
problem,
cast
is
at
that
30%?
Yeah, you can make it interruptible. That'd be interesting.
The problem with Raging is like there are certain mobs, like this is always going to be the issue with Raging, and this is not one that this fixes. It just kind of band-aids it. I don't hate it, but it's like there's always going to be mobs that require mandatory enraged dispels at a certain level,
like
the champions. Okay, yeah, Klotos is a great example. The champions in Theater of Pain, like the Soulstorm mobs in Theater of Pain, the gas bags in Theater of Pain.
So many diverse dungeons that have tough trash mobs with Raging. I agree.
Yeah, exactly. It's but the problem is that there's always mobs that like basically have mandatory enraged dispels, and this doesn't fix this. It kind of band-aids it a little bit. The mobs this expansion are not like the worst thing for enraged dispels. We've seen previous expansions where it's just like every dungeon has a mandatory enraged dispel. This expansion probably only like 3 dungeons have like a mandatory enraged dispel. Theater Pain just happens to have like 10 of them.
Yeah, it's you also can play a rogue now. It's rogue, hunter, or druid gets to soothe. But I do agree that like it's kind of weird that one of these affixes is just like a comp check, right? Like, hey, did you remember to bring a rogue, druid, or hunter? Oh, you didn't? Oh, yeah. Hope you're not planning to do a 20 theater this week.
It really sucks when there's 2 affixes that are comp checks in the same week, like Prideful as well. Do you have a Holy Paladin?
Prideful every week as well. Coming in with that check.
Every dungeon. Do you have a holy paladin?
Yeah, every dungeon.
All right, that's the list of dungeon nerfs we had to go through. An interesting set of changes for sure. I think a lot to like about the stuff they've done. In particular, I think the boss nerfs were pretty much A plus as far as I could see. The affix nerfs as well. There's some good, some bad, some a little bit of things that I think room for improvement on. And the main thing that I've learned this week is I really love that JB idea of just making affixes, or making tormented and potentially even just the solution for affixes in general, of looking at the way they scale into high keys so that they can be interesting and hard in low keys and then not take over the dungeon in high keys.
Agreed.
Let's move on though to, we got a couple good Q&A questions, but first we get to thank our supporters at patreon.com/Titanforge. They are Paul of US Tichondrius, Kumcubine of US Tichondrius, Dratnos, Tettles, and Trell. What do you mean?
Band name.
Delete DH is back to looking for healer for MDI and live. Good luck. Good luck out there. Gainful employment is not fun. Ja, Dratnos' Dino Pillow, Chromed, Trekkie, Never Nude, Chewy, Nasumi, aka no acronym service until Ma 9.1 introduced. It's not AMZ, it's AMZ. Salty Senny, Necris, Tankdill, Nevuk, Sinmora, Evie, now of US Proudmore, Stevenson, Love the Constantinople Bit, Take Light of the Protector and Frenzied Regen off the GCD, No Trick, I Scheduled a Tettle's Flame, Cutting Edge Sire Dematicus, Dymat, Paint Stick Figures are the best way to explain raid strats, Lufer, Nyx, Farewell Castle Nathria, Your Real Loot Drops were the friends we made in your halls, Brusif, Dratnos Rats Abyss, Comp Stomp rises again, feels strong, man. Glad to see Comp Stomp coming back. Hopefully there's something good to farm in there.
Yeah. Blood of the Enemy, round 2, let's go.
I farmed 180,000 honor in 1 week in that place.
Dude, you would farm 12 hours a day for Blood of the Enemy. This is like the most vintage Dratnos moment. Is him sitting there, like just grinding Blood of the Enemy on every single character. I would come into his chat. Hey, Tettles, do you want to come do Blood of the Enemy farming? No, Dratnos, I grinded it on my one character. Thanks for asking, though. He goes, yes, I've been here for 10 hours. I go, have you stood up at all? No. Okay, dude. All right, that's epic.
Insanity, Xena, we are praying Hanny will pump in 9.1. Rogue is now good enough for Prog, but still bad enough to be sat for SLG. Bless up. Dude, two more resets of SLG, and then we outie. Red color, Some Zero of US Tichondrius, youtube.com/workbringer. Morty died 3 times to mechanics this week, a horror of US Proudmore. KOZ's mythic team is trash cans and not trash cants. Gallic, Snicker Shelby, Alphabet Soup, Druid Friends of Evolved Gaming, Roly Poly Boulder Fist is now Roly Cowboy Emerald Dream. I assume that means maybe a guild was found as well, so
oh yeah,
congratulations.
He found a guild, and it's my guild actually on the other team that raids in my guild.
Oh yeah, you're in one of those guilds with like several raid teams?
Yeah, we have 2 different teams in Nascent, yeah.
So cool. Gonzo XD on Zul'jin, Titanforge Hot Tub stream or we riot, and actually it'll be a Titanforge ASMR stream, but we're looking to make sure we won't get banned for it.
I got the chicken hat. We're good to go.
Okay. And Chaos 966. Thanks all for the support. And I don't know anything about what the chicken hat means in this context, but
you haven't seen that clip?
No.
Oh my god.
I don't follow the ASMR scene, I'm afraid.
That's a post pod. Once we shut down the show, you can watch it on stream. Just don't include them in the show. It'll be fine.
Okay. Let's move to our Q&A segment. Our first one comes from Caps on Discord, who asks, how do the hosts think the M+ meta would change if class buffs, so Arcane Intellect, Powered Fortitude, Battle Shout, Mystic Touch, Chaos Brand, were to be all removed? And would that help Elemental beat Fire Mage?
Yeah, it's mostly about Mage, right? I don't know. I think that is a big thing that Mage brings is Arcane Intellect and Lust. And if they didn't have Arcane Intellect, then Shaman is way more viable. I don't know if Mystic Touch or Chaos Brand is really as big, though.
Well, yeah. The problem is that, like, there are classes that do more than 5%. Like, the delta for Mythic plus damage is a lot higher than 5% is the problem.
Well,
even
in
if
Raid,
you got full value.
In Raid, if I'm bringing Chaos Brand, or intellect, right? That's buffing 20 people in the raid, right? And
Yeah.
even though it's only effective on like 10 of them, a 5% buff for 10 people, that's like 50% of one player's value being brought there, right? You're never going to break that threshold with just like spec balancing on something else. So Chaos Brand is always going to be worth it in any good raid comp. You will never see a raid comp without a Chaos Brand. And plus, though, you're only buffing 5 total people, on whom, maybe 3 are getting effect from Chaos Brand or Intellect or whatever. And so it's actually, now we're looking at something that's like sub 10% of one player's damage being brought by that buff. Much more something that can be just taken over by raw damage. And you can look at that like most Mythic Plus groups. It's not like we're bringing warriors for Battle Shout. It's not like we're bringing priests for Fortitude. Mage is good, and when mage is good, intellect is something that's there, and maybe it's something that's like barely bringing them over the line relative to other specs sometimes. But all of the class buffs, I don't think really are long-term impactful to M plus comps in the way that they are in Raid.
Well, the problem, like, and a great example of this too, is that in Raid, on average, like a DPS will do somewhere between like 7 to maybe like 8.5% of like a damage on a boss. Like 8.5 is like, holy shit, that guy's doing a lot of damage, like relative to the rest of his raid. Maybe even there's some bosses where it's like AoE fest and it's like can get a bit spicy, but that's neither here nor there. In a dungeon, your DPS are doing like 20 to 25-ish% of your group's damage per DPS. And so it's just like not as proportional all the time.
Yeah, so 5% is a lot less of that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's, of course, it's less than 5% because it's only magic damage or physical damage or whatever, intellect. So
Yeah.
in the, like, looking at any specific metagame, like, would it maybe change the relative values of Ellie and Fire this patch? Yeah, maybe. Maybe that would be something. I mean, probably not this patch. Fire is really, really, really good this patch. I think that slot is pretty locked in, but for any two specific classes that are really close, like maybe, but it's not like a systematic issue in M plus, I don't think, like it is in Raid.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the classes that are really close, like you're saying. I think that's usually the tiebreakers, like who has the better buff for the group. If everything else is equal before that, but like in the case of Fire Mage versus Ellie Shaman, Mage is also really tanky, and you can't really get around that with Ellie Shaman. You're like Onk is kind of a defensive,
AG,
but
AG is pretty big.
AG is good, true.
But yeah, it's definitely like one small thing of many in a kit that it can be relevant. Whereas in Raid, it's like no matter what the status of Mage is, we are bringing one Mage at least. No matter what the status of Demon Hunter is, we are bringing one Demon Hunter at least, right? There's no way around that in Raid. And it's just not like that at all in M+.
Yeah, exactly.
Muyu in Discord asks, how do you find a new cutting-edge guild as a tank that doesn't want to play DPS? I feel like most guilds only ever look for DPS or heals and then just use the same tanks for ages. That's a hard question.
Trell?
Well, Trell decided to go DPS, right? To Raid as.
Yeah, I got out of there as fast as I could. So raid taking is actually really fun, I think, if you're getting into it for the first time. But people like me who did it for a while, it gets pretty old, especially on farm. As a DPS player, if you've ever done that before, you tend to be able to do more damage each week in farm. And to do that, the same effect as a tank, you have to really sabotage your group a lot of times and do some kind of degenerate stuff, and it just doesn't feel good.
Especially because you're the rest of your raid is like, oh yeah, let's start dropping healers or whatever, and as the tank, you're just there like, okay, all right, I guess I'm playing even more tanky than I was before. Yeah.
Yeah, but for the question, like, how do you find a tank that doesn't want a DPS? That's a hard one. I think a lot of guilds these days actually take DPS players and put them in the tank role for a little bit, which is what Dradnos did.
I didn't want a tank
there forever.
Yeah, but I think my guild is a pretty illustrative of the situation here, where it's like we are not really looking for tank applicants. Like we have me tanking, and I would rather DPS, but like the inertia behind me being the tank in the guild right now is really high because if we get a tank that is not good, that's really damaging for us, right? We know that me tanking works, so the only way we would move me off of tanking is if there was somebody that we were like convinced would be a good tank. And probably the easiest way for that to happen, unless we have like, a tank from a better guild than us, which there aren't many of those left, applying.
Okay.
I'm just saying, no big deal, no big deal. It would be a DPS player tanking during farm and it working out or whatever, and then like, okay, I would get to go back to DPS. That would be sweet. But for the most part, like even though we have a player who's tanking that doesn't want to tank, we're not really recruiting tanks at this point, much as I wish we were. I think a lot of guilds are kind of in that position as well, where it's like if they have a tanking setup that works, they're not really looking to change that. So your best bet is to find a guild that doesn't have a tanking situation that works, because those guilds are really desperate for tanks, and if they can't trick their DPS players into tanking, I mean they'll probably be pretty willing to give out some trials on a stretch goal basis.
Dude, most guilds, like if you're looking for a tank, like a tank is an immediate need. Like if your mage leaves or whatever, right? You normally have somebody with like a mage alt or something like that, and you can kind of fill it for a couple weeks while you recruit a new mage. You can always get like another like DPS player. You can always get another healer, right? You can figure out the situation. If a tank leaves, that is an immediate need. You're like, oh no, we need to fill the spot this week, otherwise we're not able to raid. And so you're just like, all right, DPS player that's been in the guild forever and shows up to raid reliably and cares about the guild. You're tanking now. You know what they say? I fucking hate this. I'm in.
Yeah. Now, if you find a guild that has just done that, they're probably, though, pretty interested in getting a tank in there and putting their player back on DPS, right? But if that DPS player transitions to be a permanent tank and is not just like a band-aid for 2 weeks, then again, that slot becomes, like my guild, pretty locked in, and you're going to need to like really convince us that it's going to work out before we would take a risk on it.
Tank like turnover is also just kind of trap. Like you don't really, unless there is like there's major turmoil, you don't normally lob a tank either, unless there is major issues.
Well, to lob a tank, you kind of have to have a backup plan in place, right? It's not like a DPS where it's just like, oh, somebody's bad, we can kick him. With tanks, it's like, okay, what are we going to do about tanking that is better than this before we commit to like changing anything?
I think it's worth mentioning too. Like tanks are so important that if you're a tank player out there and you're looking to climb in ranks, getting to know people in other guilds is like the best way to find a higher ranked guild, because at some point they're probably going to need a tank, and if they know a tank player, they're going to ask their friends first, because it's so risky, like picking up a random tank player. You have no idea how well they communicate, how well they work with their co-tank, if they're going to have a good relationship and all that. But if they know you personally, it makes it a lot easier to just take a risk on you.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good point. It's hard out there though, but the nice thing about a tank is that once you do kind of get yourself cemented in a spot like that, there's a lot of job security. You don't ever really worry about getting benched on fights unless you start really sucking, which.
It's great if you're a streamer too. You get permanent stream content.
It's true. You're never benched, but you never get to sit during farm either. On farm, you're just in for every boss. You never get to just like take a boss off during farm, which is actually, man, I wish I could sit for some of those SLGs
do you miss
and
that?
councils,
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
I've been posting standby so many weeks just playing TFT these days.
Man.
Dude, okay. I actually have a little bit more news about the Plague Boar situation. So they changed them. They used to be rigged Plague Boars at some points, and now they're just the wretched Plague Boars.
So you have to DPS them to 30 to get them to explode?
No. They're the non-bomber ones, like the ones from the beginning. They just said, that, the rigged ones are the only ones that explode. And so now there are wretched Plague Boars everywhere. Hold on, let me
Do
send
they
you a
keep
clip
spawning?
I don't know. Well, I don't know about the mini boss. I know here's a clip
put it
about
in the doc. Okay, nice.
Yeah, it's this is the Globgrog one. Like these are the ones that are like right after Globgrog, and those are no longer rigged. Those are just the wretched one.
Okay, let me pull this thing up.
Those.
Okay, hang on, I gotta resize.
Because you said that, you're not sitting next week. Yo, bro, I showed up to do boss. Hold on. Why are we trash talking me in chat?
Hey, your raid leaders in chat, Tuttles.
Man. I had to show up and do Denathrius and ended up raid leading Denathrius this week. 100% success rate, by the way. We killed it first try. I am a hero.
Treller, are you reading chat? Did you see if
yeah,
anybody asked in there? Because I'm not reading. I don't have chat open. I didn't see.
I hate you so much. Oh my god. What is wrong?
No, nobody asked.
Okay, thanks for confirming. All right, so that's the news about the Plague Boars. That's pretty big. That means there's just no rigged Plague Boars like in the whole dungeon now. Is that the thing? They're all wretched, all the way through, or are there still some rigged ones?
It's although there's just a couple.
And the ones during the
like
gauntlet
the
are
2 packs.
wretched. Okay.
Maybe like the 2 packs right after the first boss, and that's it, or something. Sounds like.
That's big news. Other big news is oh, okay, what's this? This is a clip?
This is not for the show.
Okay.
Take Emran's stream.
In the show, then we'll watch this.
All right. Then we'll be out of here. Thanks everybody for hanging out. And yeah, bye.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.